You know what I'm saying? Don't let them harvest your energy to propagate voting. Okay. Now we're going to get to this. Now, when you understand the diametrical difference between the eukaryotic cell and the prokaryotic cell, a eukaryotic cell is basically the epitome of splice genetics, right? When you have splice genetics, that means that you don't have the mitochondrial DNA that connects your etheric core to the planet. So that means that you don't have a soul, you have a spirit, right? So when the spirit energy is being facilitated by the moon, the prokaryotic cell is the embodiment of prokaryotes, which is the first organism in the universe. That's within the infrastructure of the physiology of the black woman's genetics, right? So everybody doesn't have that mitochondrial DNA. Everybody doesn't have it. But it's one of those things where when it comes to the draconian juice, when it comes to many different things that subjugates and puts an encryption on your anatomy, it's a reverse of frequency to where it basically extracts and transmutes the prokaryotic cell to a eukaryotic cell. So that's why I say you got indigenous people living in an unnatural system, right? Because it changes up your physiology. If you was at the gathering of the masters, Dr. Ju Pukum, she was talking about putting a cast on your physiology. That's what this system does, right? Which is basically an encryption. She didn't go too deep into it, but when you're talking about a cast on your physiology, you're basically talking about the lunar light lock frequency that locks down your DNA, right? Because we all know that technological devices basically puts an encryption on your anatomy. That's what technology does. It locks down DNA to where you're not able to unlock those codons, right? Because when you unlock those codons, what happens? It connects you to the space-time continuum to where you're able to reverse the polarity of the conscious energy grid on the planet that basically dematerializes the grid system. So the more you wake up, the more is going to activate the sun, and it's going to activate the sun within you because we are connected to the planet etherically. So let's get to, I got some super chats in here. Let me see. Appreciate the Queen sending out the 777 energy. And what are your thoughts on Brazil plane crash? So like I said, I only live about 5 hours away from Atlanta, Georgia. So no, I did not, get on no airplane. I'm not going nowhere I can't travel to. If I don't have control of my own destiny, you know what I'm saying, I'm not able to operate behind the wheel, I'm not going nowhere. But when it comes to, that plane crash, like I said, it's inevitable that the grid is going to shut down. And it's not only subjected to, plane crashes and things of that nature. If you have any type of nanotechnology within your physiology, all you got to do is, hit that big red button and it's going to shut down your whole physiology. There's a commercial that they put out maybe about a few years ago, and they were basically talking about, it basically demonstrated on how everybody just dropped dead when the grid went down. Right? Anybody ever seen that commercial? If you seen that commercial, put 888 to pay homage to the Lionsgate portal energy because it's still here. So if you've seen that, put 888 in there in the chat. But that commercial basically demonstrated that. So we all know that the World Economic Forum said it's inevitable that the grid is going to go down because we know that the far right bureaucratic system of the Republican Party, they are basically the epitome of a totalitarian government. So a totalitarian government is the precursor to a cybernetic dictatorship. So that's based on transhumanism. So they want to turn this system into a transhumanistic system. So that's why they came out. They're coming out with a movie on August 30th called Afraid, but it's really talking about the propagation of artificial intelligence, right? Because one thing you got to understand about artificial intelligence is basically a form of energy extraction, because artificial intelligence, all it does is the technological radiation extracts the neurons from your body and it uploads it into a neuromorphic cyber cloud. And when it's uploaded into a neuromorphic cyber cloud, that's when the archons can mimic the energy of the chosen people on the planet. Because when it comes to the archonic forces, they don't have the ability to create because they don't have a soul, right? You can only create if your etheric cord is connected to the heart chakra. So they don't have, emotional feelings and things of that nature when you're talking about the archons, right? So that's why they use technology, artificial intelligence to extract the energy to mimic humans, mimic the chosen ones, mimic the indigenous people. That's what that's all about, right? Because like I said, this is an energy extraction matrix. This is a better simulation of reality, right? That is being controlled by a holographic system that's being propagated by the magneto-hydrodynamic ascending gaps on the rings of Saturn that creates this holographic projection that's being extracted from Saturn and the moon. That's why they call it the Saturn moon matrix, right? Let me see. Let me get some more questions. But yeah, that's what this is all about. The more you wake up is going to break the spell. And that spell is the fermented dome. We're in the quarantine zone. That is where you're talking about the spiritual cutoff when you go to the book of Genesis in the Bible. That spiritual cutoff is what cut off your magnetism, right? MAG, right? When you look at the word magic, your magic is your magnetism. When you tap into the magnetism, this is where you can do psychometry, clairvoyance, levitation, telepathy. That's when you can tap into those energies. But as long as they got that fermented dome up, right, that is basically the embodiment of the spiritual cutoff. It's a technology that created that whole infrastructure for the archons. So we're going to get to some more questions. Let me see. We can get into some gang stalking because the more you see, the more, hold on. But free the bro, Rashad Jamal. I think I can't even find the question now. But it's a super track question. Terrace expand on the fascia. Yeah, Yaki, he touched on the fascia nervous system, right? So one thing, when it comes to the fascia nervous system, is connected to the neuromelanin by way of the melanocytes, which are basically intelligence molecules, because neuromelanin is the brain essential nervous system melanin that activates the piezoelectrical frequency within the 7 energy cortexes of your chakra system, right? So the electrical energy has a piezoelectrical frequency because we know when you understand the physiology of the indigenous people, they have magnetites and dendrites in the brain, which creates an influx of neurotransmitters and crystals to where you activate the Christ consciousness, right? So the fascia nervous system is basically the electrical force field that is basically around your whole nervous system. And your nervous system is basically the embodiment of your energetic morphic field. So the nervous system is basically the remote control to your whole energy field. That's what it's basically talking about, right? I can't go into that too much because me and Yakob was talking about that, because that's when he breaks it down from a dietary standpoint. That's where I'm going to come in with the metaphysics, right? So I don't want to get too deep into that transmission to yet. So let me see. Like I said, I'm up here. Y'all can ask me anything. We finna talk about everything tonight. Anything you want to talk about, brother? What is the 3 things you've been doing every day to level up? This is what I do. What I do, I always, first thing first, I write down my goals with a pencil. If I'm at my girl's house, that's different. I don't have, I ain't got my pencils and my notepad and stuff. But if I'm at home, first thing I do when I wake up is whatever I was dreaming about, I use a pencil. I don't use pen. I don't write. I don't put it on a computer or nothing like that. You use a pencil because graphite is a derivative of carbon. So this is a form of, from a metaphysical standpoint. So when you write down your goals, when you want to write down something, it's going to put you in a state of tunnel vision, because the graphite energy, which is a derivative of carbon, it has a certain frequency to it to where it's able to manipulate the ethers. So that's one thing that I do. I write down my manifestations. Like I said, I go to the gym. I go in that steam room. Like I said, you got to look at, you can't be, when it comes to this great awakening process, you can't be one dimensional. Get massages, you know what I'm saying? Because we got energy blockages on our physiology. Go in the gym, go to the steam room, go to a sauna. You know what I'm saying? This is another way to upgrade yourself to where you don't have those energy blockages and those brain falls, to where you can tap into the apex of consciousness, right? That's what it's all about. It's like I said, it's not all about just meditating every day and with your crystals. You really got to do some work. You got to go through a process of self-realization, right? That's when you get into the spirit of Melchizedek. As I was telling y'all before, I already broke that whole thing down, right? It's all about self-realization. Oh yeah, another thing that I do, like I said, I read every day. Like I said, you work out more than you read, you're still out of shape. Like I said, you gotta make time. I don't care if it's 30 minutes a day. Make time to, understand whatever you want to study, right? That's what it's all about. We can't just be watching YouTube videos. You got to become a scholar, and be careful of what you're reading. Because a lot of times you got to study them in order to understand what's going on. Because the great majority of the books that I got, it's all talking about satanic worship. I got grimoire books. I got occultic books. I got books by Pascal Beverly Randolph. I got books talking about the Rastafarians. I got books that's talking about all types of shit. But like I said, in order to facilitate the knowledge, you got to understand the enemy intuitively, right? Let me see. Y'all got any more questions? Let me see. So like I said, you got to tap into the form of equilibrium, because what is equilibrium? Equilibrium is balancement, and balancement is God, right? You can't tap into the God frequency until you level up. Let me see. Okay, the red star and the blue star. The red star and the blue star, this is basically a part of the propagation when it comes to the Holy Tablets by Dr. Malachi Z. York, Freedom Master Teacher. And the red and the blue star are basically coming from the tri-solar system of planet Risk. So this is also acclimated to the Hopi prophecy when you're talking about the red star Kachina and the blue star Kachina, right? And the red star Kachina has the ability to go through a process of a supernova. This is why they coming out with the movie Beetlejuice. I broke this down about the red sun and the blue sun in the last transmission that I put out when you're talking about the 888 Lionsgate portal, right? Because they know that this planet is going through a form of mastery. And we also going to have another 88 portal coming up when I think it's August 26, 2024. That's another 888, right? And these portals is basically a funnel of energy, right? It's a funnel of gamma radiation that's hitting the planet that's manipulating the simulation. That's when you get an interface transition. So when you have interface transitions, right, when you get these energies from the blue sun and the red sun, these energies is causing a vibrational frequency on the planet to where people are starting to have deja vu. They starting to have things like the Mandela effect. When the conscious energy grid system is being manipulated, that's when people have all that, forms of deja vu. That's what happens. Because the grid system is being manipulated. Exactly. You got another 888 coming up. Right? Because when you understand that the universe is mathematical, right? The universe is mathematical, and you can show and prove by way of that through gematria or Vedic gematria, because this holographic universe that we're living in is being facilitated by the energy of the moon, which is a quantum satellite. It's an artificial celestial megastructure that has a supercomputer that controls the simulation. So that's why everything you do on this planet is a form of a soul trap, right? You love food so much to the point it basically takes over your emotions, soul trap. You love religion and Jesus so much to the point where it takes over your emotions, soul trap. That's because, like I said, you're supposed to use your emotions as a navigation system to reverse the polarity of the energy extraction matrix. That's why I said you got to use the matrix in order to get out, right? Let me see. Okay. James, let me see. We finna get to a lot of questions. I've been wanting to talk to y'all because for some reason, when I try to go live on my computer, when I'm just doing a demonstration by myself, all of a sudden I have all these manipulations and things of that nature. And I got good Wi-Fi. I talked to FaZe when I was in Atlanta, and we're gonna do something again. So shout out to that brother. That's one of the bros right there. Okay, let me see. So did you hear about the data breach back in the No, I did not hear about that. I did not hear about that. But everything is being infiltrated. Everything is being infiltrated. Okay, I got a super chat. Let's see what y'all talking about. Salute to Catalea. Can you tell us about your opinion? Okay, whatever they got, whatever they're gonna do, just like me and Rob was talking about. Me and Rob was talking for a long time. We chopped it up, and this is one of the very first times I was able to connect with that brother. I had time, he had the time, and we talked on the phone for about 3 or 4 hours last night. And in my opinion, whatever they got to do, they got to get started right now, right before the election, and just
going through a little change. But I appreciate everyone who's been supporting. And we got ourselves the one and only LifePath 7 BDELL1014. And we're going in, we're talking about, melanin. We're talking about the heat. We're talking about the sun, the saunas, on the importance of saunas. And we're also going a little bit down the rabbit hole when it comes to things esoteric type, movies. But, going forward, BDEL, you said for women or anyone who's emotional to use their navigation system.
Yeah, use
so
it as
does that mean use it as a what?
Yeah, use your emotions as a navigation system. That's how you got to use it. You got to use it as to navigate through the matrix, not to be subjugated by the matrix. Because what's the first thing women do, you know what I'm saying, or anybody who doesn't have their emotions intact, the first thing they do when they get in a relationship, they busting car windows, they slashing tires, they throwing tomatoes at you. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. They doing anything that's basically diabolical because, like I said, your emotions is going to deceive you every time. They're going to deceive you. Right. Because this is how you know emotions is not in a state of righteousness, because it becomes toxic. A person would tell you that the sky is green if the color blue hurts their feelings. Because, like I said, your feelings is acclimated to a certain emotion. So by way of the emotional energy, it becomes a form of toxicity, because then you believe in things that don't make sense. You say things that don't make sense. You do things that don't make sense, which is a form of demonic possession. So by way of the emotional energy emotions that's connected to the energy of the moon, the lunar cycle, this is where these entities are able to control you within the simulation by way of the emotional energy that's connected to the physical plane and materialism on planet Earth.
Yeah, I asked that question because astrologically, you know, you got some people who are water signs who naturally they emotional, they get moody, you know, or sometimes people can't control that emotions that they feel. They get moody, they get a little bit jealous, they get envy, you know, they get sad, depressed, sentimental. Like they said, water signs are more sentimental, meaning like they're a little bit more darker, you know. So I had to ask that question just to help, you know, my fellow water sign friends get out of those traps, you know, because myself, I feel good when I'm in a logical state. I know I can study, I can research, I can think things, I can solve problems, that practicality. Whereas if I'm in an emotional state, everything's chaos. Emotions is chaos. It's chaotic.
Yeah.
When you're emotional,
You like